The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Tuesdays, July 18th, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us early. This is earlier than our normal stream, but, you know, I think I like early. Early is good. Early means I might could get home to my family and have a normal family life at home. That would be good, right? I think you appreciate that. You could join the conversation, weigh in on any of our discussions tonight, 857-600-0518. We got a lot of ground to cover and not much time to cover it in. As always, we'll be reading your comments in the comment section below, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We will be listening to all of your conversations, all of your, well, that sounded creepy. We're not going to be listening to your conversations. We're going to be looking for you to participate in our conversations, and you can do that via Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Also, as always, we like to start by thanking our patrons, without whom it is not possible. So we thank you for being a supporter of the Benjamin Dixon Show, and we invite you and everyone else to become a supporter. Go to patreon.com/the BPD Show. And become a patron for $2, $3 a month to support what we're doing here at the Benjamin Dixon Show. Okay, that being said, I want to start with the obvious news of the day, the big headline news. TrumpCare is dead. Finally, TrumpCare is dead, and it looks as though it may be dead for good. But I do want to take the warnings from the editor for the New Republic, senior editor for the New Republic, Heat Gier. He said that just because it looks like TrumpCare is dead, doesn't mean you should stop fighting it. Because it's basically like a zombie and it can come back. So you got to decapitate it. You got to cut its limbs off. You got to make sure that it never comes back. And it's important that we think like that, because no sooner than last night, when Mitch McConnell realized that he lost 2 more Republicans, he was not going to be able to pass TrumpCare. As soon as he a replacement, as soon as he realized that, he decided that he wanted to repeal Obamacare without replacement. Now, the Congressional Budget Office said if Republicans take that track, if they go down that road, that means that they would lose, that America would lose potentially 33 million more people off of our insurance rolls. So this laser-like focus and desire to push back against, and not push back, but to undo everything that President Obama achieved with the Affordable Care Act, with Obamacare, they are so focused on repealing it at no matter the cost. Think about it. No matter the cost, they are interested in repealing Obamacare because they have a vendetta against President Obama. Not because this legislation isn't conservative enough. That's the whole reason I'm pointing this out. The legislation is conservative. Obamacare is a conservative piece of legislation. It came from, we talk about it many times, but it comes from the Heritage Foundation. It was first tested in Massachusetts by Governor Mitt Romney, then Governor Mitt Romney. It is a conservative piece of legislation that uses market-based principles to increase the number of people on insurance, that have insurance, and to do whatever it could based on market principles, right? That's the cliche, in order to keep premiums down. But that wasn't enough. That was not good enough for Republicans. They didn't want that because it was passed by a Democrat. It was passed by President Obama. And so long as it's something that was passed by President Obama or a Democrat, it doesn't matter how conservative the legislation was, they have to oppose it. Well, Republicans learned today that opposition for the sake of opposition, even though it's fun and even though it makes it seem like you're efficient, does not give us any indication of whether or not you have the ability to lead. In other words, the Republicans opposed President Obama at every stop for the past 7 years, and now when it's their time to shine, when the stage was fully theirs, they had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. No one to stop them but themselves, and they destroyed themselves. You can't, I mean, this is, again, I want to be cautious here because the Republicans will come back full swing with everything they have just to spite America in order to assuage their bruised ego. They would perhaps attempt to repeal Obama without a replacement just to get back at Obama and just to stick it to Democrats and stick it to people who oppose them, even if you're not a Democrat. And that goes to show you that they're not interested in what's in the best interest for America. They're interested in what's in the best interest of their ego and what's in the best interest of their political agenda, even at the expense of the most marginalized Americans, elderly, the poor, the sickest. That's who they're willing to hurt for the sake of their vendetta against President Obama and for the sake of their ego. I want to get you in on the conversation, 857-600-0518, but that's the sad reality of it. And so here we are, the Republican Party has demonstrated that they are completely incapable of leading, of running a government, they're completely incapable of managing the United States of America. I mean, they had 7 years, and the best they could come up with was something that was so politically unviable, so politically problematic that it will cost them seats in the 2018 election, which shows you why Mitch McConnell wanted to just repeal Obamacare but not have the effects take place for 2 years, because we know the most important thing is for them to get past the 2018 midterm elections and then screw America. They didn't want America to be aware that what they're doing is trying to screw you after you reelect them. And so here we are. Here we are. We have now demonstrated full on display for the world to see. We see clearly that the Republican Party is completely incapable of leading America, managing America. They're feckless. They're morons. And we cautiously laugh them to scorn, because how do you have the White House, the Senate, and the House, and all you've talked about for 7 and 8 years was repealing and replacing Obamacare, and when it's time to take the test, everybody realizes that you are not prepared to take the test? That's amazing to me. And it's hysterical to me. Caller, let's take this first caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah. Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for calling in. I agree. So listen, this is the idea that the caller was leaning on was the idea that perhaps, I guess, out of a scorched earth and from the ashes, the phoenix of single payer could emerge, single payer healthcare. And it's not outside of the realm of possibility. However, that is a risky game to play for those 33 million people who would be without health insurance in 2 years. That's a very dangerous game to play, and I don't say a game in the sense of insulting the ambition of getting single payer in the midst of Donald Trump and the Republican Party scorching the earth with regard to healthcare. I'm not calling it a game so much in a derogatory sense as I am saying it's a wager. That's a risky wager to say that, well, if the Trump administration destroys everything, then perhaps out of the ashes we could see the phoenix emerge, and that phoenix would be a single-payer health care for everyone. Single-payer is the goal. That's where we want to be. That's where we as a developed nation, the wealthiest nation on the planet, that's where we should be. But I am not one, and the caller kind of alluded to that, I'm not one to say that we should destroy everything with the hopes of getting something better when we're not in the position to really get much better. Not yet. We're not there yet. And we are in a place where the Democrats, and actually I want to broaden it from just Democrats. We're in a place where people who oppose neoliberalism, people who oppose the establishment, people who oppose the Republican Party, people who are not Republicans, however you fall and whatever our disagreements may be, the fact of the matter is that what we want, we're not empowered to get. And so we are literally at the mercy of the fecklessness of the Republican Party. If they were not so incompetent, they would be able to utterly destroy the progressive movement in terms of policy. We'll always be on the sideline shouting and chanting, but in terms of policy, they would be able to irrevocably destroy the progressive movement, at least for a generation, if not for their incompetence. So I, for one, want to thank God for their incompetence. I'm grateful for the fact that they have no idea how to lead. All they know how to do is obstruct. And now that we know that all they know how to do is obstruct, we should really, they need to drive this home. They need to drive this home amongst Americans, for Americans to understand very clearly that Republicans cannot lead. And if they were competent enough to lead, where they want to lead us is so atrocious that we should never again give them an opportunity to lead. The ideal situation for me is this. I don't think that we should destroy the whole system in order to get progressivism. I think that we should destroy the Republican Party in order to get progressivism. And by that, I mean, let the Democratic establishment, the people who want to triangulate, the article that came out today that said that Democrats are looking to align more with blue dogs. You know what? Let that iteration of the Democratic Party become the Republican Party. Let the Republican Party destroy themselves. Now, we're at least, hell, a good 2, 4, 6 years away from that. But I would rather fight tooth and nail to oppose the Republican Party and stop them from hurting 22 million in the best case scenario, upwards of 33 million in the worst case scenario, more Americans off of insurance than are currently on insurance right now. I would rather fight against that and do all that we can to push, listen. Anyway, I'm not going to discuss that. I'm not going to, I guess I started it. The point is this, is if there's a group of Democrats who want to be Republican, you know what? That's as far right as the Overton window should be in America. The right side of the Democratic Party, because the right side of the Democratic Party represents the only modicum of sanity of conservatism in America. There's a level of conservatism that, fine, I will debate with. Fine, we'll discuss it. Fine, let's come to the table and let's argue back and forth. And you know where that is? That's in the right side of the Democratic Party. That's not in the right side of the Republican Party or the center of the Republican Party, because the right of the Republican Party and the center of the Republican Party have lost their damn minds. So if there's any way where we can see a concept of the phoenix rising from the ashes, it shouldn't be based on the ashes of the most marginalized people in America. Make it up on the ashes of the Republican Party, replaced by the Democratic Party. Let the Democratic Party be the party of Wall Street and the party of big business. That's fine. That's fine. I would rather fight against them than to fight against the insanity that is the Republican Party right now. So again, I want to say this again because I think it perfectly encapsulates the point. We cannot build, we cannot put our hopes and aspirations for a progressive future and base it upon a phoenix rising from the ashes of marginalized communities. In other words, you've aligned with conservatives, you've aligned with the alt-right, and you wanted to destroy the system, because if you destroy the system, then you believe that from the ashes of that destroyed system, then a more progressive future will emerge. But the secret's out. Those ashes will come at the expense of the most marginalized Americans. The most marginalized Americans will be the people who pay the price. And when they are paying the price, that means the people who need the safety nets the most are the ones that are hurt. The people who need systemic injustices torn apart, they would be hurt the most. And why build it on the backs of those people when we could build it on the ashes of the Republican Party? All right, let's take this next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and/or question? All right, caller. I don't think I have you. We'll try it again. 857-600-0518. If you want to weigh in on the discussion, let me know what you're thinking. And actually, let me make a switch here because I want to make sure that we don't miss any callers. And we definitely want to see what you think about it. But I appreciate that last caller because it really does. There is a great divide in Democratic-leaning, progressive-leaning circles, the left, neoliberals, even I mean, the fight between neoliberals, the fight between progressives, the fight between progressives and the further left. There is a fight to be had there. And I, for one, want to have that fight. I think that's the fight worth having. But I don't want it to come at the expense of the most marginalized people. All right, caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and/or question? Yep, this is you. You're live. What's your name? Yeah, I can hear you fine. What's on your mind? Oh, okay. Okay. Caller, I'm sorry. Caller, I'm sorry. We're having some technical difficulties here. And it's unfortunately, you guys didn't hear the last caller. So that's on our end. That's a technical difficulty. We're going to hold off on calls, even though I can hear them on my end, and make sure that you all can hear them next time. So what we're going to have to do is we'll take your comments in the comment section, and we'll work out that technical difficulty before. Actually, I already know what it is. New systems, ladies and gentlemen. It's a brand new systems that we have in place, and we will we'll do it better next time. All right. Let's talk about a couple of other stories. But actually, one addendum to the story of healthcare. We can't let our guards down. We can't just revel in the fact that the Republican Party utterly destroyed themselves on this battle, because the reality of it is that they could come back next week and pass some legislation. They could come back the week after that and or just repeal and replace. So we must be ever vigilant. We must make sure that we have all hands on deck, that we are still calling our senators, we're still calling our congressmen, we're still letting them know how expensive of a price they're going to have to pay politically if they do not vehemently oppose this health care coming from the Republican Party. And if they vote for it, if they support it, then we're going to do everything in our power to put them out of power in 2018 and 2020. We have to make sure that they know that in no uncertain terms, because that's the only way that we can keep the pressure on and not let them think that they could just sneak up on us next week and pass this zombie piece of legislation. All right. So I had an interview slated tonight. We wanted to discuss the water and energy crisis that's happening in Gaza, and I was going to be speaking with our co-managing editor of ProgressiveArmy.com, Salam Warkos. But as you can tell, we're having technical difficulties on our end with our phone system tonight, and so we're going to have to punt on that interview until tomorrow night to make sure that you can hear the interview clearly. So I appreciate your indulging us and your patience in that regard. All right, a couple of other stories that's happening So more information is coming out on the case of the woman in Minneapolis who was shot and killed by a police officer. And last night, as we begin discussing it, we discussed it in the context of how different this scenario is now that it's happening in a white community. Someone pointed out, they say, yeah, it happens in the white community all the time. No, not like this. So there are white people who are shot by the police. White Americans are in the majority, so obviously it would make sense that more white Americans are being killed. But there's a disproportionate amount of African Americans as compared to the percentage that we make up in the population. So there is a disproportionate effect happening in the black community. But there's also something else at play here. It's not just a raw numbers game. It's a case-by-case issue where we're discovering that police officers are using the fact that they're afraid, and afraid in circumstances that never warrant fear. And in the case of where it doesn't warrant fear, the police officers are still saying that they are so afraid that they have to kill somebody. And we see this happening time and time and time again, especially with people who are unarmed in the black community. We see it happening all the time. And to see something like this happen, where somebody was unarmed, posed no threat to the police officers, and to see it be a white woman in pajamas, the woman who called the police herself, that doesn't happen in the white community all the time. And what we discussed last night was the fact that this situation is uniquely different in that it exposes, in a very painful and unnecessary way, to the white community the type of problems, I'll keep it there, the type of problems that the black community has been talking about for a long time. My friend Sean King over the New York Daily News wrote the article, and he discussed it in terms of how police violence crosses the track and police violence spills over from the black neighborhood and into the white neighborhood, and how it should serve as a wake-up call to say that if this can happen in your neighborhood, then what in the world do you think is happening in every other neighborhood? But the story took an interesting turn today. The story took an interesting turn. Well, last night, before the show was over, we found out last night that the police officer who shot and killed Justine Damon was a Somali American and a Somali American Muslim. Now, this has presented a new dynamic in this conversation that really shouldn't be there, but I'm not surprised that it's there. And what I mean by that is that we wondered for a moment, just for a brief moment, we had to wonder how Republicans, conservatives, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, how they were going to get around the narratives that they've spun every single time it was a black person that was killed. He should have complied. He shouldn't have run. He was a threat. He was a thug. The police fear for his life. And we wondered briefly, just for a glimmering moment, that perhaps because they see it happening in a circumstance that breaks all of their narratives, that perhaps, just perhaps, I mean, it's the naivete. You know, we're still not naive. We're still idealistic. Perhaps they would see what's happening in the black community and give it a second look. But because the officer who shot Justine Damon was black, and because the officer who shot Justine Damon was an immigrant or a Somali American, and because he was Muslim, this gave them every single thing they possibly needed to never have to discuss the reality that this is a systemic problem of hyper-militarized, hyper-aggressive police officers across the country. Now they don't have to talk about that. Now all they have to talk about is, I saw one conservative host say that it was a diversity hire. And because it was a diversity hire, that he wasn't as qualified. And because he wasn't as qualified, this is why the individual died. So you add a fourth dynamic, not only race, right? They could try to spin this as a race war, as a racial killing. Then they could try to spin it as an immigrant issue. Then they try to spin it as an Islamic issue. And now they try to spin it as an affirmative action issue. Perfect cover, if you think about it, for people who never want to discuss the reality of systemic police violence in the United States of America. And now they found the perfect way to be outraged about this story without being outraged over the thing that created the problem in the first place. In other words, they couldn't not be upset and demonstrate anger. They couldn't use their regular talking points in this case because it wouldn't work, because they couldn't dig up it wouldn't play. How would that play? Just think about it. This woman very well could have a criminal past, right? We don't know. You know why we don't know? Because not a single damn outlet looked it up. You know why? Because if they did that and attacked a dead white woman with something from her past, that would be political suicide and career suicide for any journalist. So they couldn't use that because no media outlet even thought about doing that. Shouldn't get so upset about this, right? But that's the shit I don't like. I cannot stand that. One, because it shouldn't happen to anyone. But two, this shows us clearly and very distinctly how different they treat African Americans and people of color. In the media, the first thing they're going to do is crucify you and destroy your reputation and blame the victim. And in this case, there's not a single media outlet that's willing to do that. And because they're not willing to do that, that means that the usual playbook for conservatives in instances like that is completely thrown out the window. They can't vilify the victim because to vilify the victim would be career suicide, political suicide, because she's a white woman in her pajamas. How the hell are you going to vilify her? You can't say that she should have complied, right? They can't say that the cops fear for her life, and so they needed something. And so what do? They lean on the fact that he's a Somali-American Muslim. Because he's a Somali-American Muslim, that means that somehow Allah has something to do with this. Islam has something to do with this. Diversity hires have something to do with this. All you have to ever give conservatives and Republicans, all you have to give them is just this much cover. If you give them just that much cover, they will run through the gate like a pack of cockroaches, and they will push their agenda. All you got to do is just give them enough cover for them to be outraged, or at least pretend to be outraged. And that's exactly what this story has unfortunately turned into. It's turned into political posturing over the race of the police officer, because now they don't have to say it's not your standard trope, right? It's not your standard storyline, right? But they have something that they could grab hold to and say, no, there's no need. There's no real need for us to discuss the systemic problems of police in America, because this isn't a systemic problem. This is a problem of the individual. This is the individual Somali-American Muslim problem, because he was a diversity hire and he was unqualified, and that's why this woman ended up killed. How much you want to bet this man will be found guilty of at least at a minimum manslaughter before the end? Well, this is August. I'll give you before the summer next year. I guarantee you, this guy is going to be indicted unless there's something. I don't know what tape they have, because their body cameras were off. Maybe there's audio from the dash cam, but maybe there's something that just happened so insane that that they find a way to get him off. But I doubt it. I'm almost willing to bet that this guy will be found guilty of at least first-degree manslaughter by before next summer, after spring. And here's the thing. I see people saying things like, oh, well, where's Black Lives Matter? Right here. We're just as upset about this as we are anything else, because this shows you the extreme absurdity of our current policing system. We're right here. When the 6-year-old young white boy was killed in Louisiana by 2 black police officers, we were right there. But the problem is that they're not using these people, these white people who have been killed, they're not using them to bring light to an injustice. No, not at all. They're using them as props to keep Black Lives Matter and people who support Black Lives Matter from discussing the systemic issues that we face in this country. Because if they were really serious about it, they wouldn't be sitting around asking us where we are. They would be out there protesting on their own. They wouldn't sit around and say, well, what about all the white people that were killed? Well, bitch, tell us about all the white people that was killed. Go out there and protest for them. And guess what? I guarantee you there's going to be some people from Black Lives Matter standing right next to you, because we know good and damn well if it's happening in your community, it's going to happen tenfold in our community. But instead, they just use their own fallen people from their community as props, not because they're concerned about them, but because they want to use them to stop us from complaining and protesting and critiquing the systemic failings of our policing agencies. That's the game they play. And so the point that I was making, to come off that tangent, the point that I was making is simply this. It doesn't matter to us what the race of the police officer was. It doesn't matter to us what the race of the victim was. What matters is that it happened. And it happened to yet another person that it did not have to happen to, that it should not have happened to. That's what matters. That's what we're ultimately concerned about. The overall failing of our policing agencies, the breakdown and the systemic problems in our policing agencies. That's what matters to us. And so if it happens to a black person, we're outraged. If it happens to a white person, we're outraged. Can they say the same? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not only are they not outraged when it happens in the black community, they willingly and happily participate in the defamation of character of a person that was killed, no matter, even if that person is a 12-year-old. We're not playing this game. We're not playing this game with you guys anymore. Tricks are for kids. Get that away from us. We're not playing that game. You know why? Because we know that not only do you not care, you revel in the destruction of the character of fallen people who've been slain by the hands of our policing agencies, the same people who killed Justine Diamond. And while we have empathy for the white community, we don't, as a matter of fact, in instances like this, we don't even have to see it as a distinction between communities. We see it as a continuation of the same problem. But not only are you not concerned about it, you revel. You get joy. You get some type of twisted, sadistic pleasure out of destroying the character of every single person that's not white that is killed by the policing agencies of America. Because, I don't know, I guess that's just how your mama raised you. I don't know. I can explain what the problem is, but I can't explain why the problem is, outside of the fact that it is a systemic problem that has its roots in the history of the vilification of black people in America. In other words, America intentionally and very systemically vilified black people so that they can make America afraid of black people. And if you can make America afraid of the barbarians, then that perfectly explains why you have to enslave them. That perfectly explains why you have to use Jim Crow laws to control them. So it has its roots there. I can explain the what, and I can explain parts of the why. But in terms of like why people just don't want to see it now, well, I think I just answered my question. They don't want to see it. There's an entire group of people who honestly believe the only thing wrong in America is with the people who are complaining about America. That's the most fascinating thing to me. People who honestly believe that the only thing wrong with America are the people who complain about America, and that everything else is fine. Everything else is fine. There's no racism in America. It's just black people complaining. There's no real poverty. The only reason there's poverty in America is because people are lazy. Even though poor people work more jobs and more hours than anybody else in America. Some of the laziest people I ever met in my life. Some of the most incompetent people I ever met in my life were the wealthiest people I've met in my life. I mean, shit, look at Donald Trump. I mean, we can completely take this away from anyone that we know personally and just talk about the fact that we elected the wealthiest president that we've had in a long time, who happens to be the most incompetent and the laziest. But if you're poor in America, the reason you're poor in America is because you're lazy. The only thing wrong with America is the people that are complaining about it. That's conservatism 101. Q got no rings in the chat room says they don't care about systemic problems, man. They care about white supremacy. White woman killed by the police state is just collateral damage to them. That's a shame. That's really the shame. They have collateral damage is the perfect way to put it. All the white people, listen, here's the thing. You know who should be out there? If we're talking about raw numbers, not percentages. Percentage-wise, there's a disproportionate amount of people killed in the black community by police officers. But raw numbers-wise, if anybody were to be upset and be out in the street protesting the problem of our policing agencies, based on just the raw numbers, it should be white America. But if they ever really came out against the problem of police violence in America, then they can't possibly do it without underscoring the stuff that black people have been saying forever. And this is what the comments said. They don't care. Q Got No Ring says they don't care about systemic problems. They care about white supremacy. The white woman being killed by the police is just collateral damage. And I'm mighty afraid that that's true. I'm mighty afraid that that's true. And that's where we are in America. I'm sorry. Can I correct myself? That's where we've always been. That's where we've always been, and it shouldn't be come as a surprise. Part of it is still a surprise. I mean, part of it still is a surprise, but it should not come as a surprise to us. In other police brutality, police shooting news, Ohio cop Ray Tensing, who shot and killed Samuel Dubois, will not be retried after 2 mistrials. This is the case of the former university police officer who shot and killed Samuel Dubois as he was arrested for it, tried for it, got off twice because of a mistrial, and now he will not be tried for the 3rd time. It's on video. It's on video, and if I recall, I remember it was either the chief of police or the mayor of the city showing the video about 1.5 years ago and saying how and this was right before he was arrested. They arrested him because he saw the video and he saw the same thing. He saw how blatantly absurd it was for the police officer to kill Samuel Dubois. And this is another case of people seeing the same videotape as everybody else in the world, but they get on the jury and they can't find themselves to find a police officer guilty. This was back in July of 2015. Yeah, so it's 2 years. I said 1.5 years. It was 2 years ago. And there's a video, and it's a graphic video, but we blurred out much of it. There's a video on my page that shows you as Samuel Dubois was pulling away in his car, the police officer whose life was not in danger whatsoever shot him in the head and killed him. A university police officer, University of Cincinnati, Ray Tensing. So he's off the hook. He's free to go. I'm sure he'll start a GoFundMe account, and a lot of the good old boys across the country will pitch in and make sure that he's got a nice, cushy life, because that's how it goes in the United States of America. That's where we are. And again, I gotta correct myself. Twice in one night, I have to correct myself. That's not necessarily where we are, but that's absolutely where we have always been. That is America. That is America. I'm still trying to think of a case where somebody was found guilty. In recent memory. I mean, they couldn't even find Michael Slager guilty. He shot and killed Walter Scott, shot him 6 times in the back as Walter Scott ran away. I've got the most tangential example, but it's in my head, so I might as well give you. I remember I wrote a story when I was like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, and it was an investigative, short story, a young Sherlock Holmes or something, for lack of a better phrase. And part of the story was a scene where they ran out of he was chasing a criminal out of a building, and the hero, quote unquote hero of the story, shot the guy in the back, killing him. And I let my sister read it. One of my sisters read it, and if I was 9, then the oldest one would have been 14. I let them read it, and instantly, a 14-year-old looked at me and said, "Your cop's a murderer." I know that's like the most tangential thing I've ever pulled into as an example, but if a damn 14-year-old can look at the written proof that a cop shoots a man in the back, and it doesn't matter if the man was a criminal All that matters was he was running away from the police officer. The police officer had no reason to be afraid, yet he shot and killed a man, shot him in the back. If a 14-year-old could get that out of a piece of fiction, why the hell could a jury of our peers not see it? You know why? Because they don't want to see it. They've never wanted to see it. So that's the case of Samuel Dubois. That's pretty much done now. No justice for that family. No justice for Philando Castile in St. Paul. No justice for Tamir Rice. No justice for Jonathan Crawford. No justice for Eric Gardner. No, I mean, the list goes on and on. Hashtag after hashtag after hashtag. But something tells me we're going to get justice in this Justine Damon case, and we should. There should not be, like I said last night, justice is not robbing other people of justice, or justice is not making other communities be treated as poorly as African Americans and brown and people of color are treated in America. Justice is making sure that people of color and African Americans are treated just as good as white Americans. So we're not looking for there to be a mistrial in this case. We're consistent morally. And we think this police officer should be held accountable just like any other case. But I don't think we're going to have a problem with him being found guilty. I give him to by May. By May, he's going to be found guilty. They're going to take 10 minutes. 10 minutes to deliberate. I guess I should be making myself upset about something that hasn't happened yet. But I think we can all agree that's coming. Leave your comments in the comment section. I want to hear more from you. Mike in the chat room said authoritarians always present, but there's been decades-long right-wing project to create more in terms of the stories that we have going on. A couple of interesting conversations going on there. I want you to keep participating and weigh in on the discussion. The next two stories are a little... Well, let me just talk about them. R. Kelly, the Pied Piper of R&B. I mean, it's R. Kelly. I Believe I Can Fly. Song as old as I am. I was in high school when that came out. R. Kelly allegedly has a sex cult in which women, young women, girls in college, are forced into a polyamorous sexual relationship with R. Kelly, and they can't escape. This is according to one of the girls that's been missing. Her family has not been able to get up with her for months, and they went to the press, and they went to the media, they went to the police, and they let them know that their daughter is being held against her will by Robert Kelly. R. Kelly has had a long problem of sexual deviancy, and that's putting it nicely, right? R. Kelly, I never will forget an interview that R. Kelly did with Teray, when Teray just straightforward asked him, looked him in the face, and said, "Do you like teenage girls?" And R. Kelly hesitated and paused, and instead of saying, "No, I don't like teenage girls," he paused and said, by teenagers, how old are you talking about? What do you mean, how old are we talking about? And Teray's face, if you go look at that clip, it's amazing. Teray's face was like, I'm talking about teenagers. There's literally only two ages of teenagers that keeps you from being considered a sex offender, and that's 18 and 19. So what do you mean, what age are we talking about? I mean, and I, for one, would argue that being a grown man, damn near 50 years old, talking about you're interested in an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old girl, damn the fact that the law says it's okay, something's wrong with you. But go look at the interview yourself. One of the most interesting dynamics about R. Kelly, I'm going to get to the most interesting thing about the interview last night with one of the women who is, I believe, being held against her will. But one of the interesting things about R. Kelly is the amount of support that he still gets from the black community and some white people, but primarily from the black community, because we don't have much. I think that's the best way to explain it. You know, we don't have much that we could hold on to. And it seems like every time we get somebody, you know, and no, I'm not making an excuse. I'm trying to help you understand the psychopathy, right? I'm trying to help you understand why people will defend a person like R. Kelly when we should be abandoning a person like R. Kelly. I mean, hell, how old was Aaliyah when he messed with her, when he married her? 14, 13, something ridiculous. But anyway, in the black community, we don't have much. We don't have many heroes that have not been snatched away from us, that have not been vilified. And so it becomes a knee-jerk reaction. It almost becomes like a trigger. It becomes a trigger when we see the media attacking anyone from the black community. And we're more likely to defend them even when they're wrong, because we've seen the systemic injustices where they will make someone wrong who was actually right. In other words, we will defend people like OJ, even though, right? We would defend somebody like OJ because of all the times where the system destroyed people who were innocent. It's a trigger. It's quite literally a trigger. We're quick to defend. And this is the psychosis. But at some point, we've got to realize how damaging that thought process is to our community, because we've allowed a person like R. Kelly, who should have been excommunicated from the black community a long time ago. As a matter of fact, there's people who are going to be agreeing with me and still got R. Kelly in their playlist. But we've let it go so far to where now he's not just messing with one 13-year-old or 14-year-old or 15-year-old or 16-year-old or whatever allegedly these ages are, you know. It's a whole cult. And so last night, one of the individuals who was supposedly and allegedly being held against her will did an interview. I believe it was with TMZ. And in the interview, she said that she's not being held against her will. She's there of her own volition. She wants to be there. And then he started asking her some more pointed question, as in, can you talk about where you are? And she started saying, no, I don't want to discuss that. And she didn't really use the phrasing that well. It was interesting, the verbiage that she picked. But you can listen to it and decide for yourself. But then he asked her the specific question, are you living with other girls and are you free to go? And if you look at it, if you look at her and you look around her chest area, you can see a shadow about high, about the height of R. Kelly, shaped in the watermelon head style of R. Kelly. And you see him in the background doing this. And then once you see him do that, she says, I don't want to talk about that at this time. I'm sorry. That's a cry for that's a distress call. I mean, R. Kelly, you know, rich and famous, whatever. These are still human lives. And so long as the black community keeps giving this man cover, so long as people who are making money off of him still gives him cover. It's not just the black community, some record labels who are still making money off of him. As long as they still give him cover and he's still getting these checks, he's going to be free to be a predator in our communities. I wasn't sure. I was listening to her. She was almost convincing. She actually did convince me. I was like, well, okay, well, maybe she's not being held against her will. But you look at her shirt and you see R. Kelly's tall Bama ass. I mean, I'm kind of at a loss for words there. And I'm sorry for the audience that's listening via radio. You can't see my hand gestures. The hand gestures that I'm doing is someone, you know, cutting someone off, you know, cutting at the throat, telling them to stop or don't say nothing. That's what you can see in the video, clear as day, when you watch this interview. So R. Kelly was in the background coaching her. Coaching her is putting it nicely. And so because of that, it does suggest to me that she's not there completely of her own will. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some people very well. Listen, some people very well may choose happily to get into that type of relationship with a person like R. Kelly. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities. But once you see that she is being controlled in the moment by, she's like 21, R. Kelly's like 82. Seeing R. Kelly, seeing this woman being manipulated by a grown ass man. You have to take in consideration the fact that perhaps she's just saying that because that's the situation that she's in. In other news, Michael Vick. So Michael Vick was on Fox News Sports, Fox Sports channel with the guy Uncle Ruckus. I can't think of his name. What's that guy's name? Somebody on Facebook. But anyway, I talk about him regularly on the show. And he gets on my nerves. But anyway, he was on there discussing Colin Kaepernick and the possibility that the league was blacklisting him. The possibility, questions of his activism versus his sportsmanship, and why he can't get a team to play for. And Michael Vick said something. I'm just going to paraphrase it because it's too stupid to actually give the whole quote. But essentially, he said it's most important for Colin Kaepernick to cut his hair and essentially present himself better. In the midst of a conversation of on the issue of his protest on behalf of black people who have been killed by police officers who do not have a platform large enough. I'm sorry, they're dead. Their families and their loved ones don't have platforms large enough to be able to let the world know about the injustice. And so because those families who are broken now and have a gaping hole in their hearts because they were killed by the police, because those families don't have platforms large enough to speak out and be heard on their own, Colin Kaepernick took it upon himself to use his platform, his reputation, and put it all on the line to represent Jason Whitlock. That's the man's name. Uncle Ruckus looking. Anyway, Colin Kaepernick put it all on the line in order to defend or speak out and represent people who otherwise would never have been heard. And so to that, Michael Vick in the moment, and granted, if you're watching this tomorrow morning, you probably have already seen the apology that he put, or the clarification, right? He wanted to make sure that he backpedaled enough not to get completely destroyed by the same black community who defended him back when we probably shouldn't have defended him. That's the funniest thing. Like, can I just talk to black folks for a second? I know I got a lot of white folks in my audience, but I got to talk to black folks for a second, man. We got to stop always defending everybody. And I get it. I am guilty of it. It is a knee-jerk reaction to defend people because we've seen how many black people are being unjustly treated. Look at Colin Kaepernick. And so it's hard for us to ignore it. But think about the reason I'm on this tangent now. I'm thinking about Floyd Mayweather, allegedly a wife beater. And I say allegedly because I haven't seen all the details to be able to say it, affirmatively myself. You may have, and you may be offended that I say allegedly. That's besides the point. The point is that we find ourselves having a knee-jerk reaction to defend him against a racist piece of shit by the name of O'Connor in this upcoming fight because I know exactly what it is. It's because the solidarity that runs through the black community. But what's the most disturbing thing about it is that too often you don't get that solidarity reciprocated from the people that you're standing up for. O.J. Simpson, he ain't black, he's O.J. Money Mayweather, he buys into respectability politics. Richard Spencer, the Seattle Seahawks, not Richard Spencer, Richard Sherman. Seattle Seahawks. That was a bad mistake. You know what I meant. Buys into respectability politics, right? Pull up your pants. That's the problem. Dress right, speak right. And, when the police officer pull you over, say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Right? Michael Vick, case in point, buys into the respectability politics, saying that Colin Kaepernick needs to cut his hair, and that's somehow a part of a solution of a bigger systemic problem against which Colin Kaepernick is stepping out and put it all on the line and lost his career on behalf of the black community. It's amazing the cyclical nature, the loop that happens right there. Because in this exact example, we have Colin Kaepernick being treated unjustly by a system that would rather you beat your wife than to speak out against racism. And so we as the African-American community see what's happening to Colin Kaepernick. And so it kind of adds to that ledger of PTSD or being triggered by seeing injustices such that we are triggered and we respond and defend somebody like Money Mayweather when we probably should just say, Mayweather, go kiss our ass. You didn't have our back when we had your back. And you allegedly are beating your wife. And again, I only say allegedly because I haven't seen all the details for myself. Feel free to email them to me. But in some cases where we should not stand up for people, we should let them go. But that's the cycle that the black community is in. All right. So they're calling out Jim Brown in the chat room. I'm going to leave Jim Brown alone. I'll let you guys take care of Jim Brown. A few more comments, and then we're out of time. Thanks for hanging out with us early tonight. We're going to be a half hour early tomorrow. Tomorrow night we'll be at 8 o'clock, half hour earlier than we started tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I want to make sure I covered everything that we're just, yep, that's everything that we have to cover. We'll pick up the conversation on the Gaza water crisis on tomorrow. I'm going to make sure our phone lines are fixed. I apologize for the gaping hole. I'll speak to my producer, Owen, if you could cut out the dead air. We don't want the radio audience to have to suffer through that. I think that's about it. I'm going to give a look over there to my producer and say, let's get out of here.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.